takes a whole village
to raise our children.
It takes a whole village to raise one child.
It takes a whole village to raise our children. It takes a whole village to raise one child. We all, everyone, must share the burden. We all, everyone, will share the joy. It takes a whole village to raise our children. It takes a whole village to raise one child. We all, everyone, must share the burden. We all, everyone, will share the It takes a whole village to raise our children. It takes a whole village to raise one child. We all, everyone, must share the burden. We all, everyone, will share the joy. It takes a whole village to raise our children. It takes a whole village to raise one child. We all, everyone, must share the burden. We all, everyone, will share the joy.
Good morning and welcome to the Urban Teaching and Leadership Conference hosted by the Center for Urban Teaching. I'm Hannah Hensel, one of the MCs for today's first ever virtual conference under the theme, It Takes a Village.
And I'm Jose Rosario, Mission Advancement Director at Center for Urban Teaching, and I'll be co-hosting this awesome event with Hannah.
Well, I tell you what, Jose, I did not have this on the calendar a year ago to be virtual.
No, and who would have thought that we would be having this conference in two completely separate rooms?
I know, or have to bring out measuring tape to make sure that we're socially distanced for this conversation. But you know, we're all going with the flow, we're all leaning into each other, and that's really what our theme is all about this year.
It takes a village, and it takes a village, and you are part of that village, and you are one of those key ingredients of that village.
Jose, speaking of key ingredients, what else do we need to make sure that we're having a great time with this conference?
Well, let me show you. First, you need a cup of coffee. Then, you need your coffee mug and some of the other awesome pieces of swag that you would have gotten in your Seafoot box.
This all looks really great, Jose. What else do we need?
Well, you need your conference notebook so that you can make sure that you're taking great notes and following along with today's program.
Just so happens I have mine right here, Jose.
That's great. I think you're ready to roll.
You know, speaking of taking notes, it's so important that we're taking notes. I was actually at one of our coaches' professional developments the other day, and I had my notes in front of me and I was writing down, what should I start doing and what should I stop doing? So I'm at this PD. It was about strategies for the virtual classrooms that we're running. Shameless plug if you're looking for a PD for your staff. And I was able to write down, I want to start being a lead learner. I want to start modeling curiosity because we all need to be learners in this time and age, right? So I'm really excited for the notebook to take advantage of that so I don't forget, 10 minutes from now what was just said.
Yeah, what a great opportunity to model that curiosity
Right.
and continue to make sure that we're capturing the great content that you'll be able to implement into your classroom and staff teams right away on Monday.
Speaking of modeling, we want to lean into each other, and that's what we're really hoping you get away from this. We want you to walk away learning, we want you to walk away leading, and we want you to walk away leaning into each other because it really does take a village. It takes all of us to come together to make sure that we're doing what's best for each other.
And thank you for coming together as a village to continue to support our students who need it the most this day and age. Thank you for all the work that you are doing to come together and support our students.
I think it's time for us to rock and roll with our first speaker, Jose.
I'm so excited to present to you guys today Executive Director of the Center for Urban Teaching, Krista DeBoer. Under her leadership, she continues to support our overall mission, vision, and strategy, and oversees the development of all of our programming efforts. Under her leadership, Seafoot has expanded our pipeline from 8 initial participants to serving over 1,500 prospective candidates here in our city. Ladies and gentlemen, with us today, Krista DeBoer.
Hello and welcome. My name is Krista DeBoer, and I'm the Executive Director and a very proud alumna of the Center for Urban Teaching, or as our team and family likes to say,
Seafoot!
It is my distinct honor and privilege to welcome you to Seafoot's 11th Annual Urban Teaching and Leadership Conference, as well as introduce you to our organization. Before we dive in, I want to take a moment to just say thank you. Whether you're a teacher, leader, community advocate, funder, or just a raving fan of somebody who serves on the front lines of education, thank you for being here. Amidst all of the things that are going on in your family, school, and in our community and world, including a pandemic, we are very humbled and honored that you have decided to give us the gift of your time. In late spring, I was listening to a speaker that let me in on a little secret about leadership that I personally really needed to hear at that time as we were in the midst of planning for our largest annual programming during quarantine and the Safer at Home order. I know many of you right now are navigating a plethora of challenges and uncertainties right now. So before we go deep, I just want to take a moment to let you in on this little secret so you can take a breath and hopefully fully engage in the upcoming sessions. Here it is. We don't have all the answers. We don't always know what to do. And we're making this up as we go along. Right now, every leader, every teacher, every school, every organization shares those sentiments with you. Uncertainty has always been a part of the leadership equation. Uncertainty and disruption are why the world needs great leaders. Uncertainty and disruption are why the world needs you and your unique talents right now. Great leaders show up and do what needs to be done. There's a saying that goes, 80% of success in life is just showing up. Showing up can lead to success by enabling you to reach your fullest potential. It's a powerful habit that will serve you not only in your work, but it will also help you achieve your goals and ultimately live a happier life. Showing up is about appearing consistently for things that matter. And research shows that the simple practice of showing up helps you to focus on the process over the outcome, improves your performance, helps you to move on from setbacks more easily, and create more opportunities. Because being in the right place at the right time is also a key to success. When you show up consistently in small ways, you create more chances that you're in the right place when opportunities appear. So thank you for showing up. Thank you for helping us celebrate over a decade of collaboration, networking, and growth opportunities through this conference. CFOOT exists to identify, prepare, and support high-performing urban teachers and leaders. We currently work with schools and/or have teachers and leaders serving across the world, the nation, and state of Wisconsin, but our heart is in Milwaukee. Our vision is to become the #1 producer and provider of urban teachers and leaders that are better prepared, better retained, and better positioned to have an increased impact on student achievement. Currently, 100% of teacher and leader candidates report an increase in confidence, competence, and character as a result of CFOOT's training and experience. 87% of CFOOT's alumni serve for 4 or more years. That's compared to the national average that says 50% of all teachers anywhere leave the field of education within the first 5 years. What's more is that CFOOT partner schools also exceeded expectations on the 2019 Wisconsin State Report Card, on average, beating both city and statewide scores in the categories of student growth, closing achievement gaps, and overall accountability. That indicates that students at CFOOT partner schools experience more and faster academic growth than they would at an average school anywhere in the district or state. So if you are from one of our partner schools, take a moment to give yourself a pat, pat, pat on your back, forward job well done. In alignment with our vision, we are piloting working in other Wisconsin metropolitan areas, including Racine and Madison, while working to reach a goal of having 500 alumni actively serving in Milwaukee. Because we believe that when 500 highly effective alumni are actively teaching and leading, it will serve as a tipping point, providing proof of what is possible and creating a stronghold in our city. We currently have 463 alumni actively serving in the field. 343 of those alumni are in Milwaukee, serving over 25,000 scholars. The theme of this year's conference is, It Takes a Village. If we are going to continue to move the needle in our classrooms, in our schools, and community in the face of the poverty, violence, drug abuse, segregation, and the nation's largest racial achievement gap, we must humble ourselves and leverage the full power of the village. None of us can do individually what all of us can do collectively. The song that played in the beginning is a powerful demonstration of this concept. If you separate all of those parts, the song hardly sounds like a song at all. It is truly all the individual parts linked and working together that create and support the whole. The 4 vocal rhythms in the main portion of the work, each with its own character and function, are essential to creating the unique energy and movement of the village. Only when they are really sung together does the full power of the song and its meaning become truly apparent. At the Center for Urban Teaching, we believe it takes a village. As the African saying goes, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. This belief drives Seafoot to actively collaborate with over 150 community organizations, universities, and schools to better prepare teachers and leaders to serve our children, because we believe that the commitment of individual teachers and leaders will transform our schools, our city, our state, and our nation. There's a story that was shared with me about a young boy who was trying to move a heavy log to clear a pathway to his new fort he had just made. His dad was watching him from nearby, and he was straining to move the log. After a while, his dad said, "Son, why aren't you using all of your strength?" Confused and a little angry, the boy responded, "Dad, I know you're watching me. Can't you see I am using all of my strength?" "No, son, you're not," his dad quietly responded. "You haven't asked me to help." Wow, what a great example of the collective power of our village. Effective village leaders use all of their strength by identifying, developing, and leveraging the strengths of the people around them. Now, teachers, before you turn off your ears and say, "Oop, she's talking about leaders, so I can tune out," hang with me for just a moment. I consider teachers to be the CEOs of their classroom. So when I use the word leader, I am referring to every individual listening. If you are a stay-at-home mom, you're the CEO of your household. If you are the school secretary, you're the CEO of First Impressions. If I'm talking to the janitor, you are the CEO of the building. Your title has nothing to do with your ability to lead. So lean back in and hang with me. As I was saying, effective village leaders use all of their strength by identifying, developing, and leveraging the strengths of the people around them. As they lead their village, they develop healthy alliances both with those on their team and with those on other teams. So knowing that, let's take a moment to pause and think about, how is your village? What is one word that you would use to describe the relationships right now within your family, your school, your community, and within yourself? When I think of an ideal village, I'm immediately drawn to the description of the church in the book of Acts. These believers had the same vision, the same goal, and they were all pressing toward the same mark. They were in agreement, they lived in peace and harmony, they met each other's needs, they cared for one another, and most importantly, they possessed a powerful collective belief. Now, does any part of that description match the one word you used to describe some of the key components of your village? Do you believe that the words that I just shared with you describe the relationships with your family, within your school, within your community, and with yourself? If strained and stressful are better descriptors of the relationships you have with the key alliances in your village right now, be on the lookout for strife. Strife is bitter, sometimes violent conflict or dissension, and it can exist between people, within a person, or with a place. And if we fail to recognize and resist strife, it starts to poison our attitudes, and it'll begin to negatively affect all of our relationships at school, our relationships at home, and in our community. Strife leads to resentment, bitterness, or hatred, and left unconfronted, it destroys and devastates. That is why it's so important to learn how to identify the symptoms of strife. Let's take a look at them. Here are the most common symptoms: bitterness, hatred, judgment and criticism, deception and lies, anger, jealousy in comparison to others, rebellion, unrest, fear, negativity, and distrust or doubt. When we give into any of those feelings, we're actually opening the door to strife and ushering in destruction. In schools, the most common place that strife first rears its ugly head is amongst the adults in the building, the staff. If you're not convinced that strife among staff members has any real impact, consider this for a moment. In the 1990s, a study was conducted where teachers from 12 Chicago area schools were asked if they felt their staff members cared about their well-being, whether they felt comfortable sharing transparently with colleagues or bringing issues and concerns to administrators, or if they felt their principals cared more about politics and protecting personal interests and agendas than the success of their children in the classroom. The results from that study demonstrated that schools with low trust levels had only a 14% chance of improving scores in reading and math, while schools with higher trust levels had a 50% chance of improvement. Now, while trust and good relationships clearly will not compensate for bad instruction, poorly trained teachers and leaders, or unworkable school structures, trust is the foundation for school reform and creates the conditions for success. The evidence I just shared with you from the Chicago study suggests that schools with little or no relational trust at all have practically no chance of improving performance at all. Another researcher, known as John Hattie, developed a way of synthesizing various influences and different meta-analysis according to their effect size. In his groundbreaking study, Visible Learning, which you can definitely Google and research a little bit more for yourself, he ranked influences that are related to learning outcomes from very positive effects to very negative effects. And Hattie found that the average effect size of all of the interventions he studied was 0.40. Therefore, he decided to judge the success of those influencers relative to that hinge point in order to answer the question, what works best in education? Topping Hattie's most recent list of factors that influence student achievement in schools with an effect size of 1.57 was collective efficacy, or CE. And collective efficacy, when we think about that, really refers to a staff's shared belief that through their collective action, they can positively influence student outcomes. CE is the perception of teachers in a school that the efforts of the staff as a whole will have a positive impact on student learning. In other words, if we believe we can impact change, we actually do. What you believe about not only yourself or your students, but the other adults on your team is directly correlated with the degree to which you will have a positive impact on student learning outcomes. When teachers share the belief that together they can positively impact student learning regardless of external barriers and make a difference in the lives of their students, they actually do. What an amazing thing. The idea of CE is not new. In fact, the research can be traced back nearly 3 decades. A popular researcher known by Bandura was one of the first to really be a pioneer in this area, and his early findings demonstrated that the effect of perceived CE on student achievement was stronger than the link between socioeconomic status and student achievement. Dr. Ray Dussault, one of CFOOT's founders, came to a similar conclusion as part of his sabbatical studies to study the key components that differentiate a high-performing urban teacher, leader, and school. He published a summary of his findings in 2006 known as the High Performance Triad, denoting the 3 critical components that enable high levels of performance as relationships founded on respect, high expectations, and unconditional love. These three components frame the statement, what you believe makes a difference. At Seafoot, we believe that what you achieve is a direct result of what you believe. Your deeply held personal beliefs about your students, staff, and self have a direct correlation to student success. What you and your staff believe directly impacts the diligence, resolve, and confidence with which you pursue your goals. In schools where there is a higher CE, researchers have found that teachers are more positive about engaging in professional development. They're more likely to implement what they learn in the classroom and at a higher level. They have better parent-teacher relationships, and they set more challenging school goals and are more committed to pursuing those goals. Students are also less likely to be suspended or removed from the classroom due to misbehavior. But here's the real game changer. In a study of 452 urban elementary teachers in 47 different schools, researchers found that just a 1 point increase in collective efficacy on a 6-point scale resulted in and is correlated with student achievement scores increasing by 8.5 points. That is something worth pursuing. You're probably sitting there right now thinking to yourself, this is great. How do we increase collective efficacy? Unfortunately, there is no silver bullet that will instantaneously increase CE within your school teams. However, research suggests that there are some key actions that we can implement that have the highest likelihood of increasing CE. A great place to start is by getting a baseline assessment of both your own and your staff's CE in your school by distributing something known as the CE scale. It's a really quick and easy to administer assessment that will allow you to analyze the results and get an idea of where is the CE in your building right now, so that as you implement the efforts I'm about to talk about, you'll be able to tell if you're improving, and you can see if that 1 point increase is driving those achievement results in the right direction. There are 5 sources that actually help shape our efficacy beliefs. The first is mastery experiences. This simply says that when teams experience success, your collective efficacy goes up, it increases. The second is vicarious experiences, meaning that when teams see other educators at schools faced with similar opportunities and challenges succeed, their CE increases. This is why at the Center for Urban Teaching, immersion tours are a major part of our work in developing teachers and leaders. The third is social persuasion. When individuals persuade one another that they are an effective team, CE increases as well. That's right. Those of you on your team who are the encouragers and cheerleaders, you have a very important role to serve, and you could be some of the part of the work that helps increase CE among your staff. The fourth is affective states. This is basically how you feel about something. So if your excitement increases due to perceptions of your ability to do something and successfully execute a task or achieve a goal, your collective efficacy increases. And the fifth is causal attributions. So when school teams assign student successes or failures to internal factors such as instructional strategies, interventions used, effective feedback given, as opposed to external factors like parent involvement, large class sizes, or socioeconomic status, collective efficacy increases. You can create opportunities to tap into those 5 sources of collective efficacy through professional development that builds instructional knowledge and skills that's tied to a clear educational vision. Create opportunities for teachers to collaborate around transparent data and share skills and experiences, interpret achievement results and provide actionable feedback on teachers' performance, involve your teachers in school decision-making, and work to drive out strife among staff members. I cannot emphasize the importance of this last element enough. We need to recognize the spirit of strife within ourselves, our teams, our villages, and confront it. Strife spreads like a highly contagious disease or virus. Any efforts to increase CE and trust within your staff will be futile where strife resides. The idea of working to improve collective efficacy, cooperation, and collaboration within our village is more than just a good idea. To me personally, it's also a scriptural command. Make every effort to keep the unity of the Spirit through the bond of peace. We are to hold our peace and let peace be the umpire in every situation. We should crave peace and actively pursue it. And we are to be the makers and maintainers of peace. When we work together in unity, the Bible says that God literally commands his blessing to be upon us. What a phenomenal promise to those of us who share a similar faith. When we come into agreement, Jesus shows up. He hears us and he answers our prayers. We have not been called to compare, to compete, to complain, or to criticize one another. Rather, we have been called to complement one another. Intentional collaboration through a focus on relationship building and the realization that our challenges and opportunities facing us are simply too big for any one of us to solve on our own, require us to set aside our pride and our personal agendas and ask what is best for our children. Is it messy? And does it take a lot of time? Yes, it certainly does, but it is worth it. Together, we can go further. This belief drives Seafoot to strive to reduce competition and find points for collaboration and cooperation, or as we like to say around the office, co-opetition. We all improve through co-opetition. Only you improve through competition. Therefore, we must all work together to build a better village by actively collaborating to better serve our children. Seafoot believes that the individual commitment of teachers and leaders will transform our schools, our city, our state, and our country. We believe that every single teacher and every single leader holds our children's future in their hands. At Seafoot, we are blessed to work alongside you to help shape that future. I believe together we can shape a better future for our children, even in the midst of a worldwide pandemic. Do you believe that? What you believe, what we believe, makes a difference. I hope the speakers that you hear today increase your confidence in what's possible. I hope they increase your commitment to our village, and I hope that today increases your capacity to better serve our village. Thank you.
Wow, Krista, thank you so much for those encouraging words and reminders of what it takes to be a great village. Hannah, I think I feel a prop coming on.
Oh, the one Krista did was great, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Well, give yourself a
Pat,
pat on the back for a job well done. You know, I like that prop, but you have to give yourself a pat. You can't give it to somebody else because we have to follow the social guidelines.
Yeah.
So air high five if you're giving a prop to someone else right now.
It's so important for us to encourage each other each and every day.
That collective efficacy piece is so important. So if you're following along in your notebook, now would be a good time to look at the back of your notebook. There's a section for key takeaways. Take a moment to jot down, what was your key takeaway from Krista DeBoer's presentation? For me, I know it was the whole piece around collective efficacy and the importance of it, not only for our staff, but for our students' achievement. Did I hear that right? That a 1 point increase can actually improve a school CE scores by, I had to write it down, 8.5 points.
Yeah.
That is amazing, and it truly speaks to the importance of collective efficacy.
Most definitely. And the opportunity to really believe that we can all do this together because we're a village. As we head into our next speaker series, we'd like to give a shout out to our first sponsor, Wisconsin Lutheran College.
WLC is great, proud alum over here. We love our partnership. In fact, because of this partnership, we have an opportunity to provide full ride scholarships to select individuals who are on a pathway to leadership, which is a really, really exciting thing. If it's something that you're interested in, you should definitely reach out because that is happening right now.
Please contact Seafoot if you're interested in exploring leadership one day, if you're interested in being a principal one day, and learn more about this amazing opportunity. Let's hear a quick word from our sponsors, Wisconsin Lutheran College.
Hi, my name is Andrew Zimdars, and I am the Enrollment Advisor for the Graduate Education Program here at Wisconsin Lutheran College. Having done both my teacher certification and master's degrees here at WLC, I can share from experience what to expect in both of these programs and what it is like to complete them as a working adult, husband, and father. Many current students and alumni have shared that they chose our graduate program because of our accelerated courses, flexible scheduling, and competitive tuition rates. However, the main thing we hear over and over is that they chose WLC because of the service they received and the way WLC made them feel. If you are considering continuing your education to pursue your teacher certification as a career transition or your master's degree to advance your career as a school leader or administrator, I'd love to learn more about you. What motivates you to continue your education? What is important to you in the program you choose? What questions or concerns do you have that I can help with? So let's set up a time to chat here on our beautiful campus, over the phone, or even via Zoom, and see if the WLC Graduate Education Program is the right fit for you.
Thank you, WLC. And again, we are currently accepting applications for the 2021 Leadership Cohort in partnership with Wisconsin Lutheran College. Now, the prerequisites are that you have a bachelor's degree, that you've been teaching for at least 2 years, that you've demonstrated success in the classroom, and that ultimately you also have a positive growth mindset.
That's great. We can't wait to see who is interested in that opportunity. Well, it's time, Jose, for our first Village Spotlight, and we both know her very well. She's a proud Seafoot alum. She's actually in the Leadership Development Program right now, and that is Emerald Collier. So let's hear her teacher's perspective around the theme, It Takes a Village.
So my name is Emerald Collier, and I teach 8th grade at Hope Christian School Fidelis, and I have the honor and privilege to be a part of a phenomenal village in which I'm able to develop tomorrow's teachers and leaders and decision makers. And my ultimate goal as a member of the village is to be able to develop those scholars to not only read and think critically, but also decipher the Word of God, which is the ultimate goal that I think every scholar should be able to obtain. The teacher's role in the village is not just to be in the front, teaching at the front of the classroom, and it's not to be in the back, just letting kids take the reins. It's walking alongside our scholars, helping them along their journey. I think of teaching kind of like a tapestry and thinking about it as many different layers that come together to make one picture. And so when you're thinking about a tapestry, you're not just one thread, you are one thread that is weaved into many different parts. So don't just go to the front and just be the spotlight. Don't just go to the back and play the background, but be a part of the active process of teaching our students. One tangible thing that I think that all teachers need to start doing is take risks. I feel like we're in a really pivotal time in education in which we are conquering so many different things. And it's so important that we educators are taking risks and we don't just stay with the status quo. It's time for us to actually be daring and to be courageous, because those daring and courageous actions are going to create daring and courageous students. When being a part of a village, it's very important that you're not only pouring out into the village, but you're also pouring into yourself. And so when I think of myself as an educator, a part of a really big village that's spread out all across the city of Milwaukee, I have to remember that sometimes it is okay to step back, to reflect, and to pour into myself. Because if I'm not the best teacher that I can be for myself, I will not be the best teacher that I can be for my students. And so just make sure that we as educators are taking care of our mental and spiritual health, because that is what's going to drive us in our instruction. When I think about people that have been a part of my village and people that have helped to build me and make me the woman that I am today, the educator that I am today, I think about the educators that I had in the past. I think about people like Sister Jill and Sister Tammy or Elder Brown or even Miss Bowles at Milwaukee Lutheran High School. I think about so many educators who did not give up on me. Those educators who saw potential in me, even when I didn't see it in myself. Those are the people that really built me up and they built me strong in order to pour into the scholars that I have today. So if any of those teachers are watching, I just want to say thank you so much for building me up because I'm now able to pour out into the scholars that I serve today. As I'm reflecting on everything that's happened so far this year, a lighthearted moment and a bit of a funny moment that took place this year was actually when we were 100% virtual. So I have a class of about 30 scholars who are on the computer and I am teaching a reading lesson. And so I asked one of my scholars to answer a question for me and I heard this really deep voice on the other side of the screen. Now, granted, I couldn't really see his face because the screen was facing a wall. And so I politely asked the person who was speaking, "Excuse me, could you please go and get the scholar because I would like for him to answer the question. I don't know who this is, so please go get him." And to my surprise, he moved the camera to his face and he was like, "It's me, Mrs. Collier. My voice just got deep over quarantine." So that's a funny thing that I just made the assumption that my scholar would just always be the same, but they're ever changing and we need to just accept that they're going through changes. Something that continues to encourage me and motivate me on this journey within education and as a member of the village is the fact that I've had phenomenal coaching and support from the Center for Urban Teaching. I think back to my first year as a TA at a local Christian school, and I honestly had no idea what I was doing. Scholars were all over the place, and I didn't really feel confident in my instruction. But after participating with the Center for Urban Teaching, and after having so many years of coaching and opportunities such as summer school, I've been able to not only grow in my abilities as an educator, but I also feel more confident and more ready and also more prepared to develop tomorrow's leaders and decision makers. So CFOOT, thank you.
Thank you, Emerald, for that awesome teacher's perspective. You know, Hannah, I'll never look at a tapestry in the same way again.
No, that was such a good analogy. I feel like that's going to stick with me for a while. Emerald had a lot of great things to say. I feel like just in that short segment, I had like 5 pages worth of notes to take away from that, including daring and courageous teachers produce daring and courageous students. Like mind blown. That's such a powerful statement that I for sure will take with me as well.
I will too. I totally agree.
Okay, well, let's turn it over to our next keynote, who is Dr. Rhoda Woolley. And I know that you're going to say a little bit about her bio, but let me tell you something that you're not going to find in her bio. First of all, I met Dr. Woolley when I was a student in her classroom, and I've learned that she is a Nashville singer at one point in her career, as well as a golf expert. So those are 2 things you're not going to find, but let's hear a little bit more about Dr. Rhoda Woolley.
Well, when she's not singing and golfing, Dr. Rhoda Woolley currently serves at Wisconsin Lutheran College as the Dean of Student Success and Faculty Development, as well as an Associate Professor of Education at UTLC, as I mentioned. Dr. Rhoda has spoken internationally to students, educators, and parents and teens on the topics of student success, faculty development, and student thriving. Ladies and gentlemen, with us today, Dr. Rhoda Woolley.
Hello, thank you for the opportunity to spend this time with you today. We're going to be talking about something that I'm pretty passionate about. Our theme for the conference is It Takes a Village, and so very, very true. Today we're going to be talking about the cognitive, social, emotional connection with what it takes in having a village to help young people grow up to their full God-given potential. Do you remember back to your first day of teaching? I remember back to my very first day in the classroom. I was teaching high school, and I had freshman and sophomore English. And I got there early, and I was all set up. I had thought through everything. I had my lesson plans. I had my seating charts. I'd thought about my objectives. I'd thought about my assessments, and just running through everything. And all of a sudden, I hear a voice over the intercom saying, "Miss Woolley, please come to the principal's office." I started thinking, I haven't even taught yet, and I'm getting called to the principal's office. So I wander down the hallway. My principal was a gentleman by the name of Randy Westfall, and he called me in and he says, "Rhoda, as you start your teaching career, I have one question for you." "What's that, Mr. Westfall?" "Which way is your compass pointing?" I thought for a moment. I'm sorry, Mr. Westphal, I didn't know I had a compass. And if I do, I'm not sure which way it's pointing. And he says, the best advice I can give you as you start your teaching career is to always make sure that your compass is pointed on true north, to regularly, daily recalibrate your compass. When you have your purpose, when you have your why set for why you are doing what you are doing, why are you a teacher? Everything else seems to fall into place. Now, for me, I personally am a Christian teacher. So my compass, I need to recalibrate to God's word and what it says every day. And when I can stay connected to that and calibrated to that, everything else seems to fall into place. I'm able to be much more patient. I'm able to be much more just willing to do things, willing to serve, to have that servant's heart when I keep my compass recalibrated. And so it's one of those things that I just think is so very important for us, those who are serving others, especially children, that we make sure that we're staying calibrated, that we're doing okay, so that we have what we need to have to be able to give to others. And so that's just an encouragement I'd like to start off with today. So part of what I'm going to be talking about has to do with thriving. I've done a lot of research in the area of thriving. My background is educational psychology. And for years, the field of psychology studied people who weren't doing well. So if wellness, emotional, mental wellness, is a scale from 0 to 10, for years, psychology focused on people who were mentally ill, who were the 0s, 1s, 2s, 3s, not doing very, very well. About the past 30 years, there's been a significant body of research on people that are doing really well, the 7s, 8s, 9s, 10s. And what is it about them that is causing them to thrive? Now, some people call this the happiness research. Hey, we can use happiness if you want. I kind of think happiness is a little bit more temporary, like, oh, look, a puppy. That makes me happy. But this is more a sense of well-being, knowing that this side of heaven, we're going to have challenges. Every day is not going to be a mountaintop experience, but we can still come from a place of peace and well-being. The Jewish tradition has a beautiful word called shalom. They greet people, both a hello greeting and a goodbye greeting, with shalom. And shalom incorporates, I wish you wellness, I wish you wholeness, I wish you peace, I wish you love, all of those types of things that make us like the warm fuzzies, right? And so when we look at thriving, there are some common characteristics, and I'd like to share a few of them with you today, because as teachers, it's important for us to be thriving so that we can then help our students thrive. So 3 of the primary elements of thriving, the common characteristics we find for those people that are the 8s, 9s, and 10s, what do they have in common as we study them? The majority of them have a strong sense of gratitude. They have figured out how to be grateful for the big and the little. Oftentimes in life, we have opportunities that come up and we get to decide how we're going to react to them. Are we going to be grateful or are we going to grumble? I, on a daily basis, try to refocus and have a little prayer saying, Lord, somebody today right now is praying for something I'm taking for granted. Help me not to take that. Help me to be grateful for everything, the big and the small. Somebody today is praying that when they get out of bed, that their legs will work so they can walk across the room. Some mother today in another country is praying that her children will have clean water. And I can go to a faucet and turn on clean running water. Wow, it's incredible, right? Just the fact that I woke up this morning and I'm breathing, nothing of my own effort. My heart just keeps pumping. My body does what it's supposed to do, and I can go out and live my life. Wow, grateful for that. So how do we be grateful for the big and the little? Because that's a big component of thriving, and we model that for our students. Another part is a sense of purpose, and I've already alluded to that with which way is your compass pointing. To have a solid sense of purpose, we need to have it, and we also need to be able to instill it in our children. I'm going to be talking a little bit about that today. And then the other one is just relationships. Relationships are the bedrock. They're the foundation for everything else we do in education. If we want to have a solid, trusting relationship so that our students trust us and are willing to go out on a limb and have that growth mindset, if we want to be able to differentiate instruction, all of those things are built upon knowing, authentically really connecting and knowing our students. And so how do we build those kinds of relationships so we can be those types of teachers? So purpose. When we look at purpose, I'd just like to ask you for a moment to ponder, why are you a teacher? There were so many professions that you could go into. And maybe you're not a teacher, but maybe you're somehow involved with education. Why do you do what you do? What causes you to get up every morning, get out of bed, and go contribute in the world? I often think for teachers, when we study the professions that have the highest sense of purpose, teaching is in the top two. The number one is physicians, and the number two is teachers. And I think a large reason for that is both of these professions have a significant impact on other people. We serve other people. That's our purpose, is helping other people be well, to live to their full potential. I oftentimes like to think about teaching as what better way to spend my life than to spend it on something that's going to outlast my life, right? When we can teach the next generation, we're gone and they carry it on. What an incredible way to spend our lives. I teach educational psychology here at Wisconsin Lutheran College, and I often tell my students that they are brain developers. We know from the brain that it's malleable. It changes every day. The brain that you woke up with this morning will not be the same brain you go to sleep with tonight. Based on the experiences you had today, your brain will literally change, right? You'll have new neural connections, new neural pathways. And so teachers and parents, those people who spend a lot of time with young people, we are literally brain developers. Imagine that. You get to help a young person's brain and mind develop. What a tremendous privilege. Think about just how much society entrusts us with as people involved in the educational field. Is there anything that's more valuable to our parents than their children? There's nothing more valuable to them. And they entrust those children to come spend 7, 8, 9 hours a day with us. What a tremendous privilege. During that time, we get to help these young people develop to their full God-given potential, to develop their minds, to develop their spirits, their attitudes, their passion, to help them thrive. So we are social, emotional beings. It's just how we are. We are connected to each other. If people have to live in isolation, they physically get sick. They mentally get sick. They emotionally become very unhealthy. We are connected. We are interconnected. We need each other. It's part of the design, right? And so it's important to help our students understand how that works. There's considerable research that says not only do we need to raise children's IQ, their intelligent quotient, we also need to raise their EQ, their emotional quotient, to teach them those life skills. Because oftentimes the EQ, those social emotional skills, actually are a greater predictor for future life success than their IQ. We've all known people that were very, very intelligent, but they might have struggled with relationships and other people and getting along and communicating. It's just as important to be able to read other people's emotions, to understand our own, to self-regulate, to work in a group. That's just as important as what we're learning as far as content, right? And so what do we do as teachers? How do we do that? So we call this social emotional learning, and social emotional learning consists of self-awareness, knowing yourself, social awareness, being able to connect with other people, self-management, being able to regulate our own thoughts and emotions and feelings and actions. So very important as a life skill. It also includes decision-making. How do I use my mind? How do I critically think? We're going to be talking a lot about the prefrontal cortex in a little bit because that's such an important element in here. And then finally, relationship skills. Now, we don't have time today to take a deep dive into all these, so I'm going to touch upon a few of these. I'm going to be talking about relationship skills, self-awareness, and self-management. And just another side thought here, research suggests that when we can raise our students' achievement score, when we teach them these social emotional skills, we have the opportunity to raise their achievement scores, how they do on achievement tests, by up to 11 percentile points as we focus on these social emotional things. So it's important not only to have them be happy, healthy adults and to have good relationships, but it also just helps cognitively and academically. So every reason to be focusing on these things. So let's start off with one of my favorites, relationships. So you guys have heard the mantra in real estate. When you're thinking about buying a piece of property, the key thing is location, 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 right? Well, I like to think in education, my key mantra is relationships, relationships, relationships. Everything good that happens in the educational realm happens because of solid, trusting, authentic relationships. So let's talk for a few moments about how we can help young people develop those skills. So as we equip youth to form solid relationships, we model for them. And we teach them about listening, reciprocal conversations, empathy, vulnerability, and trust. So let's take a look at that. But just a reminder, we're modeling. I like to think that more is caught than taught when it comes to this. As social learners, we're watching other people. Did any of you grow up with older brothers and sisters? If you were like me, I learned a lot about what I could do, what I should do, what I shouldn't do from watching my older brothers and sisters. I would say, well, did that work for them? And if it did, I would try it. If it didn't work for them, I wouldn't try it. I watched other people. We do this all the time. Just observe children, and you'll watch them watching other people and then adjusting their actions. We are social learners. We learn in context with people around us. And so that we have a culture, that we have an environment for this is really important. So just a few little strategies on how we can help teach this. My grandma used to always tell me, Rhoda, God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth. You should listen twice as much as you talk. So listening is an important skill. And oftentimes we oftentimes want to say stuff, we want to get our point across, but we also need to practice and get better at just listening, at hearing other people, and truly being in the moment and listening to them, not formulating our thought and what we want to say in reply, but just listening to them and hearing what they have to say. Being interested, authentically interested. So how do we do this? We practice it. We practice it with our children. We point it out to them. We remind them. We help them learn that sometimes we just need to be quiet and listen to other people. You'll have an opportunity to share your thoughts. But first, let's hear their thoughts. Closely connected to that is reciprocal conversations. I like the saying, first seek to understand and then to be understood, right? How do we teach our young people to understand? And then once they understand the complexities, then they can start expressing their thoughts as well. Boy, our society is longing for this right now. We have a lot of people hollering their opinions all the time. I don't know, it seems like lately opinions have just carried more weight than ever before. Right? Everybody has an opinion, and everybody's opinion needs to be heard, and everybody's opinion trumps and is overvalued over somebody else's opinion, right? And so how do we help our young people just hold on to their opinions for a little bit and just listen to other people? Tell me more. And just ask people to explain more. We can teach children this, and we're also modeling it for them. The other thing is empathy. Empathy, compassion, I kind of think that's the mortar that holds a society together. When you can put yourself in somebody else's shoes, when you can try to understand what it's like to be that person. You know, they've done research on people who are incarcerated and their minds and how their brains are a little bit different than people who aren't incarcerated. And 2 of the common denominators that are more commonly found in people who are incarcerated is they have a poorly developed prefrontal cortex. We're going to talk about that in a few minutes. That's the area right behind your forehead. That's the part of your brain responsible for thinking, insights, decision-making, judgment, okay? The other thing that's different is they have fewer mirror neurons. A neuron's a fancy word for a brain cell, right? And a mirror neuron is a neuron devoted towards trying to understand somebody else. And no child is born with a set number of neurons. It's something we grow and develop. So when I was a child, here again, Mom would oftentimes say something like, Rhoda, how do you think that makes somebody feel when you do that? When the adults in our lives help us do that, when they help us step into somebody else's shoes, it actually grows new neurons in our brain. Again, your brain developers. What a privilege. You get to help young children grow mirror neurons to feel more empathy and compassion. What might this look like in a classroom? Let's say you're teaching 7th grade and Jackson broke his leg and he's been out. He's had a surgery, he's got a cast. And Jackson's coming back to school. And you're talking with your class and you're saying, so we're excited. Jackson's going to be coming back here. Now just think, if you were Jackson, what would be challenging for you as you come back to school and brainstorm with the class? What would be challenging? Well, let's see, doors might be hard, right? If you're on crutches, getting in and out. So what could we do to support him? We're going to hold the door when we see Jackson coming. Carrying books with crutches might be challenging. What can we do there to support him? Lunch tray, that might be hard. You know, sometimes he might just be really tired and he might just kind of be in some pain and he might be a little bit grumpy. What can we do to support them? So as you step into Jackson's world and try to imagine what it's going to be like to be a 7th grade boy with a cast on your leg and to be on crutches, when the rest of the class does that and pretends or imagines, they're actually growing mirror neurons. Children, importance of play, pretend to play. When you play like you're a pirate or a cowboy or a princess or whatever you're pretending, you're actually growing mirror neurons. Another reason play is so very important for children as well. Okay, so that imagining, that thinking about somebody else, very, very healthy for the brain. So, and a part of that mirror neuron, I love the root of the word compassion. When you study what compassion means, it literally means to suffer with. Okay, so sometimes when people are going through something hard, we can't fix it for them. We can't solve it for them. But sometimes it helps for them just to know they're not alone. Somebody is here with me. Somebody is walking with me through this hardship, through these trials. To suffer with is to have compassion. How do we help model that for our students? How do we help teach them the value of that? All of these go into building relationships. And one of the other aspects is vulnerability. And this is part of self-awareness too. When we can let our guard down and be truly honest and authentic with somebody and not have to wear a mask, not have to put on a show, not have to be something that we're not, but just be content with who we are, who God has made us to be, and be present with somebody else in the moment and be completely honest and authentic, that's when connection can really grow. The leading researcher on vulnerability, to my knowledge, is a sociologist by the name of Brené Brown. Some of you may have seen her TED Talk. It's really good. And her study shows that there's really no shortcut for building authentic connection with somebody else. What it takes is you have to spend time with them. And as you spend time with them, you learn if you can trust them or not. And if you spend time with someone and you learn that they're trustworthy, you have authentic connection. So if we want to get to know our students better and have a better connection with them, there's no shortcut. We have to spend time with them. And we have to spend time with them and be vulnerable. And they have to, your friends are those people that know stuff about you, and yet they don't use it against you. Like they know things they could hurt us with if they wanted to, right? What's the saying? Your friends are the people who know you really well and they still like you, right? And so how do we do that with our students? That we can be vulnerable, they can be vulnerable, we can know each other authentically over time. That's when you get really solid connection. And as we do that, as we have this relationship, build these relationships, we listen, we have compassion, we have empathy, we spend time with them, we build that trusting relationship. It goes towards building a culture. And I'd like to talk for just a moment about intentionally creating the cultures in our schools, in our classrooms, in our families. Culture is derived from the Latin word colere. It's where we get our word cultivate from. Okay, so think about culture as something that's active. It's something moving. It's a real thing. It's not like a noun, something that is. It's like a verb. It's something you're doing. Okay, so a group of people working towards a common purpose is a culture, right? And so how do we intentionally create the culture we want in our classroom? Because if I don't intentionally create my culture, everybody comes to the classroom with their idea of what the culture is. And then I'm having to manage all of this stuff, and it might not even be what I really, really want. So what's the culture in your school, in your classroom, in your home? Give it some thought. Think about it. What do you want it to be? And what does it take to build that? Because in all honesty, if we're not careful and we don't intentionally build our culture, we're going to be trying to manage another culture. And that can kind of be like herding cats. And even if you can herd cats, like where are you herding them to, right? And so if you take the time to think about it and build that, it can make such a difference in the relationships in your classroom and in your school. So some strategies for building a culture of relationship. Just want to run through a few here, and they're simple, but we have to be intentional. It's not rocket science. It's not hard. It's not challenging. I shouldn't say it can be challenging, but we have to be intentional about it. So one way, simple, we like to hear our name. Use your students' names on a regular basis. There's just something about hearing a name that connects us to somebody. Actively listen. We're modeling for our students. Just like we want them to listen to us, we want them to listen to other people, we need to listen to them. and really hear them. Try to interact with them outside of the classroom. Be interested, be curious, ask them questions about their life. So grandma's staying with you right now. Oh, so your dog had puppies. Remember the little things about them. Hey, you had a soccer match this weekend. How did that go? Make those connections from outside the classroom so that they know you care more than just about history and what their grade is in that, right? One of my favorites, catch them doing good things. We all know that we find what we look for. If we meet somebody that kind of annoys us, do you kind of start looking for things about that person that annoy you? Right? And then you just start noticing them all the time? We can flip that. You can look for the positive in other people. You can, like a little scavenger hunt for good things for your students. I'm going to catch my students doing good things. And then when you do find them doing good things, let them know that you appreciate that. Let mom and dad know that you appreciate that. Full disclosure, I've never been married. I don't have any of my own children, but I did raise my nephew. My nephew came to live with me when he was 9 years old. And he came from a very challenging background. And he was getting in trouble at school often. And every time the phone rang at night, I'd be like, oh no, what did he do now? I just always knew it was going to be something negative. If you could call home to a family or send a note home that said something positive, you seriously have the power to make that family's evening. You can make that family's evening go in such a better direction. You know what? Sarah held the door open today for the class. That was really thoughtful of her. I really appreciate how she did that. Sometimes it starts with the small things. And as people start getting a sense of, you know what, I'm a helper, I'm kind, I'm compassionate, that becomes a part of their identity and they do it more. And that all can stem from just the positive comments that we notice in people. So if we can catch them doing good things, send positive notes home, make a phone call home. You know, sometimes there's the adage in education, sometimes the ones who are the hardest to love are the ones who need it the most. Right? I mean, there's that student who oftentimes just has this way of tap dancing on your last nerve. Those are the ones that we really have to be patient with. I oftentimes like to think of my challenging students, if I can, okay, in leadership, there's a 20-60-20 principle that says that when you have a group of people together, you typically have 20% who are leading in a positive way, and 20% who are natural leaders, but they're leading in a negative way. And who do the 60% in the middle follow? Whoever's speaking the loudest. So I want my positive leaders to be leading vocally. But I also want my negative leaders who God has given leadership abilities to. I want to start helping them understand how they can use those leadership gifts for good, how they can use that in a positive way, because oftentimes they've gotten attention which they like from doing it in a negative way. And boy, can you swing a class. When I taught sophomore English, I had a couple of sophomore boys that were really pushing it. And I worked overtime to make a relationship with those guys because I could tell they had natural leadership skills. And if I had an authentic, good relationship with that young man, he would keep his buddies in line. Some of my knuckleheads were the ones who did my classroom management for me, and it was such a blessing. So take the time, make the effort to really get to know those kids that are harder to get to know. There's some kids you just naturally connect with, right? And you're going to spend time with them. But how do you spend the time with the ones who are a little bit more challenging and have a real authentic relationship with them? There's an exercise out there that has been tried many times, and it usually comes back with very positive results. If for 10 days in a row, you can just notice a kid. It can be absolutely neutral. It doesn't have to be positive or negative, but you've got a student you want to build a relationship with, 10 days in a row, use their name and comment to them. Have a conversation with them. It doesn't have to be, like you're handing back a paper, and it doesn't have to be anything about the grade. It can just be some neutral comment on their paper. Just that you notice them starts to build a connection. And if you do that day after day after day for 10 days, typically at the end of 10 days, that student feels a stronger connection towards you. Give it a try. Again, this isn't necessarily difficult, but we need to be intentional about these strategies. Brand new study out, hot off the press, happened at BYU in Utah, Brigham Young University. And they were testing the ratio of praise versus negative comments. And Paul Caldarello, who's the one who led the study, he says, as elementary teachers, praise over punishment ration increases students' on-task behavior. As elementary teachers, praise over punishment ratio increases, students' on-task behavior increases as well. So as we praise them more, their on-task behavior increases. But the converse is also true. Teacher reprimands, on the other hand, have been found to predict even increase student misbehavior and an unwillingness to comply with instruction. So the more we praise students, the more they want to comply. The more we're critical of students, the less they want to comply. And this is like a viable research study that has found this to be pretty consistent. So give that a try. Just play around with it a little bit in your classroom. See if it makes a difference for you. I sometimes will hear students say, teachers say they just want attention. They absolutely do. Everybody wants attention. Every human being who has ever been born wants to feel significant. They want to feel accepted. They want to feel like they belong. And oftentimes, if they can't find a positive way to have that feeling met, they'll do something negative to get attention, right? And so how do we continue to look for the good in them, encourage the good, help them figure out their why? How has God gifted you? What comes easy to you that doesn't necessarily come easy to your friends? Sometimes that's hard for kids to figure out. You know, everybody knows who's the really good singer. Everybody knows who's the A student. Everybody knows who's the really good athlete. That's easy to see. What about that kid that's super, super compassionate, really friendly, really thoughtful, really considerate? What a tremendous life skill. How do we point that out? Right? Help kids see how they've been gifted. And because they do want attention, children who feel loved at home come to school to learn. Children who don't feel loved at home come to school to be loved. Right? So how can we have that space for them where they feel secure and accepted and significant? Everybody wants it. So again, paying attention to what they're good at, what their skills are, helping them feel what their purpose is. What is their why? Why are they going to school? Why is schooling relevant for them? You know, 80% of people who are incarcerated do not have a high school diploma. This is heartbreaking. 80% of the people in prison have not graduated from high school. I really truly feel that as a society, as schools, we are failing the very children that we exist to serve. I honestly believe that if a child fails, I have failed, because it's my job to teach that child. So how do we do this? How do we keep kids engaged to where they want to stay in school, to where they have a sense of belonging? This is my place. This is where I want to go. These are my people. This is my tribe. This is our culture. We've worked together to grow. This is a place I want to spend my time. We have to work at that for every child. So how do we build relationships? I did my master's in educating at students at risk. I've always kind of gravitated towards kids that get in trouble and trying to figure out what makes them tick and how we can help them use their power for good. And I've come up with, just over my 20-some years of working with kids, my own little acronym to help me think of, these are the pillars. These are the things I really have to do to connect with the kids that's struggling. You have to find tangible ways to show you care. Some of these kids have been told by adults their whole life that they care, and then it's just not been the case. Oftentimes the very people who are supposed to be caring for them are not. And so how am I different? I'm one more adult who says that they care, that I care. I have to find a tangible way to show that, and it's going to be different for each kid. Right? So again, relationship, get to know that kid, find a tangible way to show you care. Expectations. Just because their life might be hard doesn't mean they get a free pass, right? We need to help them develop to their full God-given potential. Most good things lie on the other side of discomfort. We have to stretch, we have to grow, we have to have that growth mindset. Everything shouldn't always come easy. And so how do we keep challenging kids? For this, I'm a big fan of Bloom's taxonomy, right? I think a lot of those kids sitting in prison, that 80% who have dropped out or who don't have a high school diploma, they're really, really bright kids. And school was boring. And if they're not engaged in school, they're going to be engaged in something else. So how do we get them engaged in the learning? And I think that Bloom's taxonomy, higher order thinking, for your kids that are feeling bored and it's not feeling relevant, how do you kick it up and make what you're learning really, how do you apply it? How do you evaluate it? How do you create something new? Help them discover. When you think of the word question, what's the root of the word question? Quest. Education should be a quest. It's an adventure. It's a journey to understand this incredible world God has given us and people and how it all works. How do we make school a quest? I remember my nieces and nephews when they were younger, they would spend when they're 2, 3, 4 years old, they'd spend 20 minutes looking at an earthworm on the sidewalk after it rained, right? Just fascinated by a worm. Where do we lose that? 4th grade? I think we sometimes teach curiosity out of kids. How do we help them to continue to be on this quest, on this journey to try to figure this all out? Keep them engaged, make it relevant. Why do I need to know algebra? Help them figure that out for themselves, right? Why do you need to know algebra? Help them figure that out. Then they're going to be much more engaged in doing it. So having high expectations for kids. Relationships, we've been talking about this all day, right? Building solid, authentic, trusting relationships. And then my last one is procedures. I think security comes from having predictable things. And for some kids, we're the predictable in their life. Like not much else in life is predictable. But when they come to the classroom, they know that I'm going to be in the same kind of mood every day. It's not like, oh, be careful, she's in a bad mood today. Nope, I'm going to be consistent. I'm a professional. This is what I'm going to show up and I'm going to be there for you. And this is how our day is going to go, and this is what my expectations are, and it's not going to change. We're going to have these procedures. Kids get a sense of security from that. They know what to expect. They know what the consequences are. That's huge for some of our... But actually, if you think about tangible ways to show you care, expectations, relationships, and procedures, this benefits all of our kids, not just our at-risk kids, right? So thanks for the work you do. Again, one of my favorite ways for trying to engage kids that might not be too engaged, get back into Bloom's taxonomy and see how you can kick up that critical thinking level for these kids. You know, there's been some research out that shows kids that have come from a challenging background and haven't had a lot necessarily naturally going for them. They come from a challenging life, challenging background. And yet they go on to become productive, caring, contributing adults. And what's the one common denominator? They had one caring, appropriate adult in their life. For some, that was a teacher. For some, that was a pastor, an aunt, an uncle, a friend's parents, a coach. But again, for so many, it's been a teacher. So tag, you're it. You're in this kid's life. You can be the one caring, appropriate adult. And it has to be authentic. Kids can just tell when it's not. Interesting study that also is pretty new about authenticity. And what they did is they took pictures of people, or they took video of two people laughing. And they had a certain group of people who were like lifelong friends, good friends, and they were laughing, and they videotaped them. And then they took another set of people who were strangers, who had just met each other, and they said something funny, and they were laughing. And then they showed this to other people, and they said, can you tell who's the friends and who isn't friends? Like who just met and who's known each other for a while? And just case after case after case, you can tell who is authentically connected and laughing after having a solid relationship with somebody and who isn't. People can just tell. We have like this sixth sense. We know when people are being authentic. And I think kids are really, really good at it. And so you have to really authentically find things to like about these kids. It can't be fake. It can't be, okay, I'm doing my job. You have to really care about these kids because they know when you don't. So part of self-awareness, so that's relationships, right? We also talked about, we're going to talk about self-awareness. And part of self-awareness, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, has to do with identity and identity development. Who are you? Who has God made you to be? Again, goes back to purpose and why. How do we help people understand this? What can you do to help the young people in your life understand who they are? Now, for me personally, as a follower of Jesus, I believe that on the last day, the only thing in my life that's going to matter, like it is not going to matter where I lived, what I did for a job, what I had for a family, what kind of car I drove. None of that is going to matter. The only thing that's going to matter when I take my last breath is that I'm a redeemed child of God, purchased by the blood of Jesus, right? And so that's what really matters to me. That's what my identity is. So when everything else can be like shifting sand, I can be secure in that. We have to help young people figure out what it is for them. You know, Barna is an organization that does a lot of research with young people. And for generations, as long as they have tracked this back, the great generation, the baby boomers, the Gen Xers, the millennials, almost everybody, when you ask them where their identity comes from, faith and family was in the top 3. With our new Gen Zs, our newest generation, faith and family are 5 and 6. You know the number one place our young people are getting their sense of identity from? Their accomplishments. I find this very scary because accomplishments are a moving target. Some days we do good, some days we don't. Some days we get the new job, some days we don't. Some days we get an A, some days we don't. Some days we make the team, some days we don't. Achievement is this moving target. And if that's what I'm basing my worth on, is how good I am at something, I am going to be a young person filled with an awful lot of anxiousness and an awful lot of insecurity. I need my identity personally to be rooted in something much stronger than that. than my ability. And so how do we help our young people understand this? Faith, family, relationships. You are worthy. You are 100% complete and worthy just as you are. Doesn't matter if you're successful or not successful, right? How do we help our young people understand this? We as teachers get to do that, get to spend our time helping them understand that. King David in Psalm 139 says, "For you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I'm fearfully and wonderfully made." I don't know if any of you have ever tried to knit before, but you pretty much have to be a perfectionist if you're knitting, right? I tried it once and I made a little mistake and I thought, oh, it's not a big deal. I'll just keep going. When I was done, that's all I could see was that stitch that wasn't where it was supposed to be. When you're knitting and you make a mistake, you just have to rip it out and redo it. God's a perfectionist. He knit you together in your mother's womb. He didn't make a mistake. You're the right height. You're the right skin complexion. You're the right body style. You have the right interests and characteristics based upon how he made you. And it's the same for your students. How do we help them be content in that? That's another attribute of people who are thriving. They strive, they want better, but they're also content with what they have. You know, poema is a concept I really like, and I'd like to share it with you for just a moment here. In Ephesians 2:10, so the first part of Ephesians 2 is talking about how we're saved by faith, through faith by grace, nothing of ourselves, no works that we have to do. It's this free gift. And then you get to Ephesians 2:10, and it says, "For we are God's workmanship, created in Christ Jesus, to do good works which he's prepared in advance for us to do." We are his workmanship, created to do good works which he's prepared in advance. In some editions, some translations, that workmanship is, the word handiwork is used. We are God's handiwork. But if you go back to the original language, in the original language, the word used there is poema. Poema is where we get our word poem from. How about this thought? You are God's poetry. Your students are God's poetry. Every poem is uniquely crafted, custom made, with just the right sound, with just the right rhythm, with just the right alliteration to convey a certain thought, to convey a certain feeling. Great care taken. God took great care in creating us. Each person unique. You're God's poetry. Your students are God's poetry. Complete value. So that's the identity self-awareness. And we're going to move on to our last section here now. And I'd like to talk for a little bit about thinking, and especially about self-regulation, which is based upon thinking. So a quick overview of the brain, all right? Right underneath your skull is something called the cortex. It's kind of the consistency of an avocado. It's made up of about 86 billion neurons, give or take a few. A thought happens when two of those neurons make a connection, okay? And everything that gets into your mind, every thought, every memory that you have came through your five senses. That's how we get stuff from the outside world into our brain. You've tasted it, you've heard it, you've touched it, you've smelled it. It comes through our five senses. Okay? We call it sensory processing. And as it comes into our brain, it's stored in different parts of our brain. So if you can recall the sound of a voice, let's say your grandma's voice. If you can hear that right now, that memory is stored here behind the ears in what's called the temporal lobe. If you can picture what grandma looked like, that's stored back here in the occipital lobe. If you remember doing something with grandma, I used to ride my bike over to grandma's house and help her mow her lawn and wash her car and play cards and just hang out with grandma. Those memories are stored in the parietal part of the top part of my brain, right here up by the crown, okay? And then the area right behind your forehead is your prefrontal cortex. That's not where stuff is stored. That's kind of like the computer. That's where everything gets processed. So you have all these memories, and your prefrontal cortex goes through and collects different parts of it and makes sense of it. Okay, so this is one of the reasons why teaching with multiple modalities, if I can teach something so that my students can see it, and they can hear it, and they can do it, they can see it, they can hear it, and they can do it, that memory is now stored in 3 different parts of the brain. It's a much richer, thicker, fuller memory. Okay, it also is more engaging for students. You're just thinking your different learning styles. You know, somebody who is highly kinesthetic and needs to move, it's going to be more engaging for them and help them more. It's also one of the reasons why we want to incorporate wait time. You don't always want to ask a question and then answer the first person whose hand goes up. A couple of different reasons. It takes a little while to go through and pull out all those memories and process what you want to say. Also, depending on what grade you teach, if you're teaching middle school, like their goal, one of their primary goals is to make it through the day without being embarrassed. And so they don't want to offer anything in class that they haven't really thought through and figured out, this is what I think and this is how I want to say it. That takes time. So we have to honor them, give them time to formulate, first off, what is she asking? Or what is he asking? What do I think? And how do I want to state it? There's also some pretty good research that says that if we're always calling on the first hand that shoots up, typically we end up calling on boys more often. Boys seem to be, at different ages, a little bit more impulsive. They're more quick to answer the question and will end up not being equitable oftentimes in our responses that we get. So that's why it's important to have good wait time. I also want to talk for a brief moment. We talked about culture earlier and what culture we want to have. Remember Maslow's hierarchy of needs in the motivation theory? If a child is hungry, or if adult is hungry or sleepy or thirsty, we can't focus and pay attention and be motivated to learn. And then it went up to the next level. If they don't feel secure and safe, they can't be motivated to learn. And then it goes up to the next level. If they don't feel a sense of belonging, they're going to have a hard time being motivated to learn. And we go all the way up Maslow's hierarchy of needs, okay? Think about that for our students. The brain, you have this prefrontal cortex up here, which is insights, thinking, critical decision making, all of those types of things, judgment. There's another part of your brain called the amygdala. In Latin, it means almond. It looks like two little almonds. It sits right at the top of your brainstem. That's responsible for the fight or flight or freeze response, if you've heard about that before. When we become alarmed, when we become anxious, when we become nervous, we actually kind of freeze or we run. And it's actually a physiological thing. When something startles us, and it's a stress response, cortisol shoots through our body. It's the way our body's designed. It's supposed to happen. It's not a bad thing. When you are stressed, cortisol shoots through your body. And what that does is it gets your heart pumping faster. Your lungs expand so they can take in more oxygen so you can run. Blood, that heart's pumping, it pumps blood out to your arms and legs so you can fight or so you can run. Okay, it's a survival instinct. It's instinct. You can't override it. It's what happens when you're startled or when you're frightened or when you're scared. When that happens at the expense of the prefrontal cortex. The neurochemicals that would normally go to your prefrontal cortex to help you think, that's being dedicated to other parts of your body to help you stay alive. So why do I say this? Have you ever had a conversation with somebody and you're having a little bit of a disagreement and you walk away and like a few minutes later you're like, man, I wish I would have said that. We just don't think well on our feet. We don't think well when we're upset. And that's because our prefrontal cortexes aren't getting the neurochemistry they need to process when we're upset, we're in an argument. So we're in our little disagreement, we walk away. First off, we start breathing because we kind of hold our breath when we're upset. So we start breathing. As we start breathing, our blood pressure lowers. As our blood pressure lowers, our amygdala settles down. When the amygdala settles down, then the chemistry can start going to your prefrontal cortex. You start thinking of all the conversation and the things you could have said, and you land on the good comeback, right? Now think about how this applies in a classroom. If somebody is sitting in your classroom and they do not feel safe and secure, if they feel intimidated, the part of their brain where thinking happens isn't working. So you can teach all day long, and that kid will not learn a thing if they do not feel safe and secure and like they belong. Right? And so it's so very important to have that culture in our classroom. Again, relationships. When they go to read and somebody rolls their eyes or tisks, that kid's not in a place to where they can learn how to read. And that's what they're there for, right? So we as teachers create that culture. I talked earlier about neurons, mirror neurons, and a thought happens when two neurons connect. So when you were little and you were learning 2 + 2 = 4, you might have really had to think about that, but then you practiced it over and over again. And you had little manipulatives, 2 cubes and 2 cubes, and now you have 4 cubes. And then you did flashcards, and then you did time tests, and you did 2 + 2 = 4 so many times that you don't even have to think about it anymore. It's become automatic. We call this automaticity. My old softball college coach, my college softball coach used to say, practice makes permanent. It doesn't make perfect, it makes permanent. As you practice it, you do it over and over again and it becomes permanent, right? And so what we do with our kids, those procedures, those thinking, think of when you were first learning to drive a car, you had to really think about it. Now you probably get in the car and you're like, did I ever put the car in gear? Like it just becomes automatic, you don't have to think about it. So when students are struggling with something, when they're frustrated, we just have to do it over and over and over again. If you want to get more fluent at speaking Spanish, you have to speak more Spanish. If you want to learn how to play piano better, every good boy does fine. If you want to just learn, you got to practice it over and over and over again. right? The same with the stuff we're doing in our classroom. When kids are frustrated, I always say, celebrate the frustration. You're getting ready to have a breakthrough. Just keep going. Don't give up. You're almost there. That frustration always happens before we get that connection and we have that aha moment. So stick with it. Be patient. We set the tone for that with our students. We've already talked about the importance of mirror neurons and empathy and compassion. We've talked about the prefrontal cortex. Remember I mentioned a lot of people who are incarcerated, the two things that their brains are a little bit different on. They don't have a well-developed prefrontal cortex. Now you can see if you're not thinking through the consequences of your actions, how you're more likely to choose actions that could land you in prison, right? If you don't have mirror neurons, if you're not thinking about how does this impact somebody else, you're more likely to do something that could cause problems. So again, as teachers, these are things we teach. We teach kids how to use their minds. One of the best ways to help develop that prefrontal cortex is to let kids make kid-sized mistakes. We can't save them. The little kid who is learning how to walk, that little toddler who falls down for the 28th time, doesn't just stay on the ground and say, I don't think walking's for me, right? We just keep getting up and we keep trying. And pretty soon we're running and we're skipping and we're jumping and we fall down and we get scraped. And that's all part of the learning process. We learn from having consequences of actions. We learn from, oh, that didn't work. And so we have to let them have mistakes. One of the other things that we can really do that is helpful is giving kids two choices. Either choice is fine with us. Which do you want? And then once they pick that, they got to stick with it. There again, consequences of their choices. This is what helps really wire that prefrontal cortex. Okay, so the more you can have students and think through with them, model for them, share with them how you think through stuff. How do you problem solve? How do you decide what you're going to do? Mental model for them. Speak out loud as you go through that process yourself. So just some different ways you can promote this in your classroom. Be thinking about how can you do this? How can you help students have choice? And then once they make a choice, learn from the consequences of their choice. So self-management begins with managing our thoughts. You have never felt an emotion. You have never had a feeling that didn't begin with a thought. It's impossible. Every emotion, every feeling starts with a thought. And our thoughts lead to our emotions, which trigger our actions. So when it comes to self-management, if you're not happy with how you're feeling, if you're not happy with what you're doing with your actions, you have control over that. Because believe it or not, we can control our thoughts. It's one of the few things we do have control over. So let's really be intentional about this. Again, Scripture actually speaks to this. 2 Corinthians tells us, take every thought captive and make it obedient to Christ. Now, I used to think that's impossible. I can't take every thought captive. Now, I might not be able to, I'm still going to be tempted. What did Martin Luther say? Temptation is like a bird flying over your head. You can't stop it from flying over your head, but you can stop it from making a nest in your hair, right? And so thoughts are going to come into my mind, but I don't have to leave them there. I have every opportunity to kick it to the curb if it's a thought that's not serving me well. I have that ability. I get to choose what I ruminate on, what I think about. Nobody else in the world can make you think something that you don't want to think. You have complete control over that. Philippians 4 talks about, finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is praiseworthy, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things, and the God of peace will be with you. What we think about impacts how we feel. As I said, what's one thing in your life that you have complete control over? About the only thing I can think of are my thoughts. So how do I be intentional about that? Our thoughts lead to our feelings, which then trigger our actions. We need to teach students how this works, right? That's the one thing, like they might not have a lot of other resources in life, but if you can teach them how their mind works, that gives them a leg up, right? If they can control their emotions, if they can control their actions by their thinking and they understand how that works, you have just leveled the playing field for them, right? So let's practice. What would this look like? So we have circumstances. We have events that happen, and events are neither negative nor positive. They just are. Okay, so what would this look like in real life? Circumstances, you have a new commitment. Somebody has asked you to take on something, some new thing. Now you have a choice about how you think about that. You could say, you know what? There just aren't enough hours in the day. I can't take on one more thing. I'm just exhausted. I'm overwhelmed. Why did I say yes to this? And how am I going to start feeling if that's what I'm thinking? I'm going to start feeling stressed, paralyzed, right? I can't do this. I don't know how to do this. And I just shut down and I can't think clearly. And then I have a raised level of stress, I'm frustrated, and I feel overcommitted. Okay, that's one way that scenario could go. Let's change the thought. The only thing that's going to change is the thought. We still have the exact same circumstance. You have a new commitment. You've been asked to do something. And instead you think, you know what? I have 24 hours in a day, just like everyone else in history has had. I can do this. I'm just going to need to manage my time. I need to have a strategy. Our brains like strategies. Our brains like organization. So when you can make to-do lists, your brain likes that. So I'm going to think that way. I'm going to make my little to-do list. I'm going to plan out my day. So that's what I'm thinking. When I think that way, I feel competent. I feel capable. It's going to be busy, but you know what? I agreed to do this because I enjoy this sort of thing. Or I agreed to do this. I want to be a woman of my word. I'm going to stick with it, right? That's how I'm thinking. So then I'm feeling competent, capable, and I begin working on it. The only thing that changed was how I think about it. We have control of our thoughts. Think about this one for a moment. Let's try it with our current circumstances. We're in the middle of a pandemic. How are you feeling about that? Do you like the way you're feeling? If you don't like the way you're feeling about it, how do you change how you're thinking about it? You know, as educators, it was a challenging summer, right? And so what if, for your thought process, you thought, you know what, I'm a teacher. That is what I do. I will figure out how to teach well regardless of the platform. If my students are with me, I'll figure out how to do it well. If my students aren't with me, I will figure out how to do it well. This is what I do. I'm a professional. I can do this. That's going to completely change my feelings, which are then going to completely trigger different actions. It's a choice, right? It's a choice we have. So let's teach our children this important skill too. When you're seeing a kid have a meltdown, you know, help them understand, what are you thinking? And is that thought serving you well right now? And if that thought isn't serving you well right now, what else could you think? How else could you think about this? Work with them through it, model it for them. And maybe do it sometimes when they're not in a meltdown, when they're in a little bit better mental state. Help them start to understand this process. Probably the first time you do it isn't when they're having a hard time. So oftentimes with all this stuff going on, we can feel anxious and concerned. And here's another thing we can just help teach children. You know, I believe there are 3 types of business. There's my business, there's God's business, and there's somebody else's business. And usually what I get really worked up about is my business, because I can control my business. I get worked up over stuff that's either somebody else's business or it's God's business, right? And so how do I just own what's mine and be faithful with what's mine, what I have control over, and trust? Trust God, trust other people. They'll take care of their stuff. I'll adjust as I need to. I can do that, right? It really helps calm down that amygdala, because we've got a lot of, you know, when we get anxious, upset, frustrated, that amygdala gets going. And when that amygdala gets going, our prefrontal cortex isn't working. And if our prefrontal cortex isn't working well, we can't be helping the children develop theirs. It's all linked. More is caught than taught, right? So just a few closing remarks that I'd like to leave you with. I really appreciate your time today. And, you know, we're going to be in the world. There's going to be challenges. We're going to have children with situations that are heartbreaking, struggling. We want to do more. We want to do something. It's challenging business. Recalibrate that compass. If we're going to be in the world, as a Christian, I believe it's important that I recalibrate and that I'm in a word on a regular basis. I think there's power in prayer. So whatever works for you with what you need to do with that, you know, we don't have to shoulder these burdens by ourselves. You know, if I wanted to talk to a leading dignitary, there are probably, like if I wanted to talk to a queen or a president or a prime minister, I would have to go through levels of security to get to that person. I take great comfort in knowing the God who created the universe is on standby, wanting to hear from me. Right? Power in forgiveness, that we start each day anew. You know, here again, as a Christian, I believe that God has forgiven me. His mercies are new every morning. There's a passage in Psalm 103 that talks about how he's removed your sins as far as the east is from the west. And if I picture a globe, like, you know, the globe in your classroom, if you start at the South Pole and you start traveling north, eventually you reach a point when you're no longer traveling north, you're now traveling south, right? North and south have finite points. Not so with east and west. You start going east, and you're going all the way, you're still going east, all the way around the world. East and west never meet. I don't know if this is what he meant, but he says he's removed your sins as far as the east is from the west. You are forgiven, never going to bring it up again. If God does that with us, can we do that with each other? When children have a really bad day, when colleagues have a really bad day, can we just forgive them? Not keep bringing it back up again? Boy, there's renewal in that. To have a fresh start is important. So very important for relationships as well. And then just one final thought. Galatians 5 talks about the fruit of the Spirit. And if we stay connected to God, the stuff that just happens, the byproduct, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. This is what the world is longing for. Isn't this what we want our classrooms to look like? Isn't this what we want our schools to look like, our families to look like? If we stay connected to the Word, to our purpose, to our why, this is just the stuff that flows from that. We can model this for our children as well. Hard stuff. This is easy to say, hard to do. But just one more final encouragement. Ephesians 3:20 tells us, "Now to him who is able to do immeasurably more than all we ask or imagine, according to his power that's at work within us, to him be the glory." You got the power to do this. So research says when you come to something like this, you're going to remember about 5% of it. It's okay. I'm not offended. I do the same thing. But there's another study that says that if you write down one or two things that you'd like to remember from today, and then you ask somebody to hold you accountable. So let's say you want to start using children's names more, okay, using your students' names, or there's one student that you just really want to work on building a relationship with, write that down. And then ask somebody to hold you accountable. Ask a dear colleague that you trust, hey, in 2 weeks' time, can you ask me how this is going? Research then says you're 85% likely to do it. So my encouragement is from our time together today, and you've got a whole day's worth of activities, pick a couple of things that really stood out to you, that are really relevant to you, that think could make a difference for you and your purpose and your why and why you do what you do. Write it down. Ask somebody to hold you accountable. Finally, I've shared a lot of stuff in a short amount of time. I just want to make you aware, I do have a podcast with one of my colleagues here at the college. It's called 5 to Thrive, and our goal is to equip parents and educators to help young people thrive. And so you can find it on your whatever podcast app you use, or our website is www.5tothrive.net. Feel free to go on there and you can learn about some of these things in much more detail. But in conclusion, I would just like to thank you for allowing me to spend this time with you today. Please know that I'm grateful.
Wow, I just learned a lot about the brain. Thank you, Dr. Woolley, and for all of your great perspective on what it takes to be a village. Let's turn back to our notebooks and capture some of those key takeaways for today. Hannah, what were some of your key takeaways?
You know what? There were so many, but I'm really trying to focus in on just one. And I think that in the time of COVID, we couldn't be talking about a more relevant topic, right? This cognitive, social, emotional needs of people who are teachers, who are students, whoever it is at all ages. But specifically, my key takeaway is the idea of mirror neurons, and that play and imagination is so important. I feel like I need to go home to my son Luke and just like pretend to be a monster and really envelop that, because it's so important for him to build that aspect of his brain.
Yeah. What does your inner monster look like?
That was like a robotic monster. I think I need to work on that just a little bit more.
As we head into section 2, a huge thank you to Ryan Rogers and his team at Graphic Terrace. Do you have any marketing needs? Then reach out to Graphic Terrace.